feelings, disputes, grief, or deficits. So again, my read of the tea leaves here would be that as a result of some of this, he probably has some, social deficits, right? But also too, there's also probably still pretty significant frustration, anger, disputes, and I don't know, what's his relationship like with his parents currently?
Okay, good.
Right, so, and again, now I don't know if that affects him on a daily basis, or does he even care?
He cares.
Okay.
It's like paralyzing, it paralyzed him.
Okay, so that then would, and again, culturally, it's not one of those things where, like in certain cultures, it's almost like, certain kids can walk back home and just go like, I'm so mad at you, blah, 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 and you kind of like, can hash these things out. That is a culture in which that probably doesn't happen. So, again, so then you have to ask yourself, okay, so like if this is a role dispute, is this something that's even worth addressing? Obviously, it affects him significantly, and is he waiting until he is really successful that then all of a sudden he'll have that tag removed, like the label will be, pulled off? Or is it something that he has to address, or is it something that he's interested in addressing? So, so basically then we have probably kind of like more of an social interpersonal deficit, and then really then the work would be, okay, and again, I'm not sure what you did, but then again the work would be, how do you help him disentangle this and look at the fact that, again, so then for me, I'm thinking like, makes sense, of course, I completely understand, this makes perfect sense to me, this, all these things, of course you're struggling, of course you're depressed. So then what you're doing is you're normalizing it, completely understanding this perspective, having him see the fact that how this process unfolded, and as a result of these things, he became more socially withdrawn, more isolated, then had a tendency probably to interpret any social misstep as a, again, I talked about it. Every social misstep then filters back into this hypothesis that there's something inherently wrong with me, which is the unfortunate legacy of early childhood sexual trauma. And so then what you're wanting to do then, again, maybe not in this particular case, but perhaps in another case, what you may want to get them thinking about is, okay, who can help them reconceptualize how they feel about themselves? Is there anybody that they feel close to? Is there any friend that they have, his brother, or is there anybody else that he spends time with? What is he doing when he feels good? What is he doing? Is he spending any time with anybody? Is he connected with anybody? Is he, what are the things that make him feel really good? So those are the things that you're looking for. And then, but then at the end of the interpersonal inventory, this is where we're at. We're here. Looks like this is what's going on. You wouldn't necessarily say to him, Adam, you have interpersonal deficits, but it seems to me that because of these early experiences, you've really had a real difficult time in relating with other people, because fundamentally you feel like that somehow or other that you're not measuring up, you don't feel really good about yourself, the things that you're doing are bringing about, occurring disfavor with others, and even in your relationships, or the times that you've tried, you feel like that they've failed, and it seems like it keeps kind of filtering back into you, feeling like that there's something wrong with you. So you're really getting them connected in with you about that hypothesis. And then what you do, then, we can talk about that later, but then that's your interpersonal formulation. And then the treatment then goes forward with this historical perspective in mind. And so then as a therapist, you're always thinking about this because, because I'll bet you dimes and donuts that from this point on, or as things begin to unfold, I mean, fortunately for him, he's kind of has been moving on, but that every other relationship that comes along will be filtered back in through this lens, and it will continue to promote and be negative. And so then currently, either like, let's say we could change the face of this thing, so it'd be like current relationships or current difficulties, et cetera, et cetera. So then really what you're wanting to do then is here you have a social interpersonal deficit, and then what are the ways that you could potentially help them start to make significant reconnections with others, or reconnections with important people, or establishing or starting to establish, either with you as a therapist or with others, perhaps other significant others, that there are good things about them, they are capable of being able to have good relationships with other people, they are capable of being able to accomplish things and feel good about themselves. So it's really, you know, that's where that's at. Now, I know in some respect this is kind of like chaotic, but does this make sense? Okay. Okay. So again, you could change that too in the context of, you know, same thing with either an eating disorder. When did it start? When did you first have episodes like that? Same thing. You anchor it, find the initiation, and then systematically go through these time periods when it was either worse, when it was better, what was going on. And then as you're hearing that narrative, then you're thinking about, okay, what's involved in the onset and what's keeping it going. Because in the current episode, like a current eating disorder episode, okay, what was going on? What happened? Tell me about what was going on. So then was there something, you know, like for example, I've been doing so well, I've been doing so well on my diet, I've been feeling like I've been losing some weight, I went out and got some new clothes, and I got invited to this party, and I went to this party over the weekend, and I got there, and there was another girl that had on the same jeans, and she looked so much cooler than I did, and there were a lot of boys that were hanging around talking with her, and I just felt so deflated, and I felt so bad about myself, and I went home and I binged. All right. So then you can look at it from a cognitive perspective, like, okay, she probably, you know, like she hadn't eaten, you know, for the day before because she was trying to fit into new jeans. She was doing a lot of restricting. She'd been trying to do a lot of activity, hadn't really been eating enough. So you could look at it like, okay, she, you know, restricted, overly restricted, and so therefore then she lost control and she binged. Okay. You could also look at it like, okay, social context, social cues, feeling bad about oneself, etc. When was the first time that happened, when you had an experience like that where you overate? Then what you're doing is the same thing. And so then your initial read on what was going on currently also provides you a little bit of insight, like, okay, well, maybe it's this, maybe it's this, maybe it's that. You know, you don't fall in love with your hypothesis. You think like, okay, this is interesting. When did this first happen? And then you systematically go through these particular time points and looking at symptom, you know, increases or symptom decreases, and then what was going on socially, interpersonally during that particular time. And then you start to suggest perhaps particular hypotheses, wondering what else was happening, what else was happening. Sounds like this was a time, you know, sounds like, you know, during that time you didn't feel like you really had very many friends. You know, it sounds like you felt really criticized, you know, that your parents said, you know, made comment about the fact that you were gaining weight, or that you this or that or this or that. And so then when you get back to where you started, what you hopefully have is, like with Adam, you hopefully have some sense about what's driving the disorder. And really looking at that systematically.